Um, Being a part of the queer community can come with some baggage, especially when it comes to mental health.
I know that for me, my emotional health had been greatly impacted by the stress I experienced from trying to figure out my identity.
I feel like I wouldn't have my gender be that gender if I also wasn't mentally ill, and I also feel like I wouldn't be the same type of mentally ill as I am if my gender wasn't a gender.
Because I would hear all these terrible things about LGBTQ plus identities and how terrible they were, and it made me feel bad about myself and not want to accept who I really was.
People respect my identity, like my mental health is like on top of the world, but like when they don't, it's like it really starts getting to me, and like when it's repeated over and over and again, that's when it's like, all right, I really need to take a step back and like recover a bit.
There's always microaggressions out in the world where they just feel like little pin needles poking at you, but they don't hurt like an outright homophobic statement would. But after a while, they all build up. It's like if you're picking at a wound, eventually you'll start to bleed.
You know, I can be walking down the street and somebody calls me a homo, and then I kind of have to spend the rest of the day contemplating about, you know, what that means and why that happened. So it's hard, but we're here and we're queer, so.
Battling mental health for almost a decade now, and not all of that has to do with, you know, being LGBT. But definitely coming out as LGBT was hard. And I thought that, you know, when I came out as trans, things would be better because I'd be my more authentic self, or I'd be on my way to being my more authentic self. But it's proved to be very challenging just because trans individuals aren't the most accepted.
People don't realize that your gender and sexuality need to be taken into account when talking about your mental health, because it's different. Every identity that you have creates another section that needs to be discussed in terms of your mental health.
I do not feel like I received any education at all about my gender and sexual orientation or romantic orientation. I didn't learn about any of that in high school, elementary school, or even in my university classes. I never really learned about any of it. It was everything I knew was self-taught or I learned from my peers.
Through various websites, in the middle of the night, just like searching what this means. When I was trying to find my identity, I'd spend a lot of time being like, what is bisexual versus pansexual versus all the other types of identities that are out there.
I took sex ed my junior year of high school because they didn't offer it before that. And it was really just a bunch of pictures of different genitals and different warts and doing crossword puzzles to match the different symptoms. So that was my sex education.
It was really not brought up. It was assumed again that everyone was cisgender, straight, and certainly in terms of STI, that was all taught in a very heteronormative way too.
So the sex ed I've had, like in high school and before, there was like no discussion of like sex. It was, I think I had something on like adolescence, and like the biggest takeaway I learned from it was shaving, which I clearly don't do now.
It really sucks that I have to like constantly seek out this information about myself in order to understand myself. And I think a lot of marginalized communities go through that, especially when they come from an area where they're like basically the only one of their kind, whether they're like the only Black person or like the only like queer student or anything like that. It really has an impact on the way you view yourself, because then your resources are just not there.
Absolutely not. Just, I mean, when you're born, you're either male or female, and that there is, I think, a big problem. I mean, science likes to use labels, so okay, but I feel a lot more can be taken into consideration. I've heard people in the medical field say how hard it is when people come in and identify one way, but their birth certificate or ID says something else. So they never know which name or like what to put in. And I feel like just a simple sit down and talking about it and just change up certain, I guess, criteria would be so much easier on everybody.
You know, most doctors at this point are pretty familiar with gay identities, but there's still just kind of a stigma, even at Campus Health. Like, I went in once for STI testing, just routine checkup, and I had to like come back in the afternoon and go to a separate room once they found out I was a man who had sex with other men. That seemed really weird to me and unnecessary.
I definitely don't think that medical professionals get the kind of education that they need for LGBTQA+ individuals.
I've been to my therapist, and she tried, I tried to explain to her and she didn't understand, and she clearly she didn't get the education surrounding that. So it was like, all right, from what I've experienced, no, people have not gotten the proper education in medical fields.
You know, just our identities are a part of us. They're a part of our well-being, physically, mentally, emotionally. So it's imperative that doctors and the medical community at large understands every part of our lives.
I feel very rewarded when I become I'm active within my community, going to maybe Pride Alliance, becoming an intern, volunteering for organizations, and speaking out when there's something wrong, but definitely that can be a lot of work, that can be tiring, so it's also important to, self-care and take a step back and just evaluate myself.
I have a great therapist, and she's been able to help me through a lot of stuff. On top of that, I make sure to have some time for myself during the week because I'm very busy through the various things that I do. So whether it's watching Netflix and watching YouTube and stuff like that.
In terms of self-care, I like to be alone and be in solitude and help myself mentally recoup from being around so many people, and actually talking to people I'm really close to about how I feel. Writing is always really helpful, so I keep a journal that I write in sometimes. So.
For my mental self-care, I surround myself with friends who know about my identities and usually follow through fairly well. There are some times where I have to say, please use caution with my identities, but normally we are in safe spaces and that helps me de-stress and just live my life as who I am.
Spending time with people on campus who I know care about me can make such a tremendous difference. Just knowing that there are people out there who support me and who love me and will give me a hug if I need it, and who will ask if I want a hug before they give me one.
I look to what I want to be in the future. So I also, like I said, I take on the burdens of others. So the kids that are younger than me, that are coming after me, I kind of be I have to be here and I have to have a voice in order for them to make progress. So I need to keep going, I need to eat, I need to sleep, I need to take care of myself so that I'm there tomorrow when, my younger sister has a bad day or something, and I can help them grow. And by that helps me grow because it's more of a motivation to keep myself here. I'm not doing it for just me, I'm doing it for all the people that I love, really.